2019 regular meeting of the Economic Development and Housing Commission. Tonight's agenda is available on the counter, along with a request to speak cards. A reminder to everyone that requests to speak cards should be completed and turned in to the clerk prior to the completion of any staff presentation. For those speakers wishing to speak on items not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of this commission, please write the item number on your card. All speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and televised. So all speakers, in order to be recognized, must be called on by the chair and come forward to the microphone. Speaking in public may cause some individuals to be uncomfortable, so everyone is asked to be professional and respectful. So with that, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Commissioner Peggy will lead us tonight.
Thank you. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a rather short agenda tonight. First up is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda. Okay. Next is approval of the meeting minutes from our special meeting last in February. Seems like it was like last week, not February.
Yeah.
And commissioners, I remind you to turn your microphones on and make sure you see a green light before you speak. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I forgot to ask for a second. Dang it, I already screwed up. Who seconded that?
I second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so carried. And now we're on to item number 3, a staff report about the Homebuyer Assistance Program.
Good evening, Mrs. Vice Chair and members of the Commission. First of all, I want to apologize. I'm trying to fight a cold, so I hope I don't go into a cough attack. But this evening, we're asking the Commission to consider guidelines for a new homebuyer assistance program. The assistance provided by the city's proposed program would complement a recently announced Wells Fargo homebuyer assistance program. A few weeks ago, Wells Fargo announced funding for their Neighborhood Lift program, which will provide forgivable loans of $20,000 for homebuyers in Sacramento County and the city of West Sacramento. Because West Sacramento was included in the eligible purchase area, and given West Sacramento's median home price is almost $380,000, staff is proposing a local homebuyer assistance program to further assist West Sacramento homebuyers. The city's proposed program would only be open to homebuyers who have been approved by the Neighborhood Lift program and would match the $20,000 assistance provided by the Wells Fargo program. The city's funds, however, would not be forgivable. We are recommending that it be a loan. However, it would carry 0 interest. Given that the city's proposed homebuyer assistance program is meant to complement the Neighborhood Lift program, the city's proposed homebuyer assistance program guidelines have been modeled very closely to follow the requirements of the Wells Fargo Neighborhood Lift program. Lastly, staff is recommending that $200,000 in local funds be appropriated for the proposed homebuyer assistance program, which would provide assistance to 10 West Sacramento homebuyers. Some potential funding sources for the proposed program would be the city's Housing Trust Fund or the recently approved Measure N funds. This concludes my presentation, and I'm open to answer any questions. Yes.
Thanks for coming in. Would this program end when the $4 million runs out, or would there be a possibility of this continuing for additional families if the program is successful?
So we are proposing an appropriation of $200,000. So it would end when those 10 families would purchase the home, unless the commission recommends otherwise, that we request a higher appropriation and the council approves that. But currently, we're only requesting $200,000.
All right, thank you.
Is that 200,000 per year or 200,000 that would be repaid over the 30-year mortgage?
So the city loan would be $20,000, and it would be a loan for the term of the first mortgage, not to exceed 30 years.
Well, I understand that, but the allocation of $200,000 to fund this,
That would
would
be-
10 people get it, and then there's no more 200,000 for 30 years?
No, so that would be just a one-time allocation. Again, if the council chooses to continue the program, we would have to come back and request additional funding allocations to continue the program once the 10 loans have been awarded. But it would be a one-time allocation.
Okay.
I had a question. I've seen your first-time homebuyer program before in the city of West Sacramento, and I was curious if you had any statistics about how many families that you offered a reservation letter to, and how many families actually bought a house, and how many of those families are still in those homes.
So we have had a homebuyer assistance program in the past, as you noted. I believe that over the course of about 6 or 7 years that the program was active, we probably approved around 40 to 50 loans to West Sacramento home buyers. We do receive payouts from time to time because, people decide to move, people decide to relocate, or unfortunately, sometimes it happens that they become deceased and the loans have to be paid off. But generally, because our requirements are fairly stringent in terms of making sure that the payments are affordable, most of those homeowners remain in place until they are ready to sell. We really don't have a lot of issues with foreclosures or anything of that nature.
And one other question, if there's only 10 spots for this special grant, how quickly do you expect that to be used up based on your history with the other program that we had?
So our understanding is that the Neighborhood Lift program received substantial, was very popular, and they have a lot of people that are trying to obtain that funding. So I would anticipate the monies to go fairly fast. Now, the Neighborhood Lift program and our program as well have a very quick turnaround time. So once somebody is approved for the Neighborhood Lift program, they have to be in contract within 60 days. If they're not able to enter into a contract within 60 days, then they lose that reservation, and it opens up for the next person in line. And we are following the same procedures as the Neighborhood Lift program.
So is that correct? There would be no time extensions or extenuating circumstance extensions?
Typically not, no. Unless they have some form of extension from the Neighborhood Lift program, then we would not provide any extension, because keep in mind that our program is complementing the Neighborhood Lift, so it's not really a standalone program where somebody can apply to our program on its own. So it would only happen if, for some reason, the Wells Fargo program would allow an extension.
Thank you, that's all my questions.
If more than 10 people fill out the application correctly and get it in around the same time, what would be the criteria for choosing which of the 10 among more than 10 qualified people get chosen?
Sure, so if, as you may have noticed from the guidelines, we will serve them on a first-come, first-served basis, but we have also included a local preference criteria. So somebody who either lives in West Sacramento or is employed full-time in West Sacramento would get priority. But as applications come in, we would date and timestamp them, and we would create the list that way. And again, anybody who lives or works in West Sacramento full-time would have priority. And that's typically how we've run our normal first-time homebuyer program as well.
I have a specific question about where the funds are coming from. And you mentioned two funding sources, and I know that City Council ultimately decides which pot of money to pull that from. From the Housing Trust Fund, this group has mentioned several times about our interest in making sure that we're taking care of homeless and providing some transitioning, you know what I mean?
Transition.
That type of housing. So that $200,000 would not remove money from those programs to go toward this,
So
if it came from the Housing Trust.
any allocations that we have already made to our permanent supportive housing project would not be affected, because this would be in addition to what we have already allocated to other projects. It would only affect it if there are any new projects that would come along, and we would use up all of our housing trust fund. But typically, we would not use housing trust fund specifically for homeless programs. I believe that Measure G funding is specifically geared towards homeless programs or prevention of homeless. Measure E.
Measure
I'm
E,
sorry,
yeah.
Measure E.
The housing trust funds are currently programmed for our affordable housing obligations, and so there is an opportunity for things that if we were to use that funding source, for example, to go forward, if Measure N. Sorry. If Measure N is not approved by council and they direct that we use these other funds, then, that would take away from our affordable housing project.
Is it your preference that this be funded with Measure N? Is it staff's preference that it be funded through
It's
Measure
the
N?
city manager's recommendation.
Okay.
Correct.
I have a couple quick follow-up questions, if you don't
Yes.
mind. So first, would this program be subject to the applicant receiving a loan approval from Wells Fargo only, or would other banks be allowed to provide a qualifying loan as well?
So the Neighborhood Lift Program is offered by Wells Fargo. That's down payment assistance portion. However, their first mortgage is not limited to Wells Fargo only. So they could get a first mortgage from other lenders.
Okay. That answers my second question, was that, do we have any sort of assurance that Wells Fargo is going to keep the rates competitive with other banks, but if they're opening it up to other lenders, that's kind of the same
Correct.
thing, and being competitive? And then, the answers my question as well is, will the loans be also serviced by Wells Fargo, and if it depends on who's going to be
Correct.
with that loan? Okay, thank you.
I had a couple quick questions with respect to how this plays out, and I'm not a loan officer, I have no experience in that wheelhouse. But as I see it, there would be $20,000 through the LIFT program and $20,000 through the supplemental program, and I'm wondering, how is that money allocated? Because I think one of the barriers to first-time homebuyers is the ability to save up enough money for a down payment. And so I'm wondering if any of that money can be used for a down payment. And my second point is more of an opinion than a question, and I think you could probably benefit far more people if you look at it, rather than $20,000 for 10 people, you do $10,000, and then you can reach 20 people, and I think that might be more useful. But the second one's just a point. The first one is really a question of whether that could be allocated toward down payment funds.
Sure. So the assistance that they would be getting from the Neighborhood Lift Program and from the city's proposed program would specifically be for down payment assistance. Then the applicants would have to go out and find a first mortgage or qualify for a first mortgage to actually purchase a home. But
So-
both,
I apologize, I didn't mean to cut you off.
go ahead.
So then my question would be, if we're looking at putting 4% or 20% down and looking at the average home prices, I think $40,000 would exceed the 4% down, so that just kind of follows my prior point of spread the money around and more people can qualify for homes.
So if as you may have seen from the guidelines and the Neighborhood Lift Program, the program is limited to households who earn at or below 100% of area median. We ran a calculation of how much home somebody with that income could afford in terms of their first mortgage, how much first mortgage they would be eligible for. And based on our calculations, they would probably be able to afford a mortgage of about $300,000.
Okay.
So by providing $20,000 in addition to the Wells Fargo $20,000, that still lives in with a gap, but it's a less of a gap, substantially less of a gap that they would have to make up from their own funds or from other gift funds or from other program funds. That was the reasoning for matching the $20,000 that the Neighborhood Lift Program is providing, because we, based on, again, the median home price and how much of a first mortgage somebody with that income could afford, we just couldn't see that happening. They wouldn't be able to find a home that they could afford at those median home prices.
Okay, that makes sense. Is there any was there any thought toward helping people succeed in making that mortgage payment over the long haul, maybe some resources or financial planning or anything like that might be able to help people as they're qualifying, and maybe some stipulations that they go through these classes as part of receiving those funds? And then another question that came to mind is whether the companion subsidy that West Sacramento would be providing, if that's also forgivable like the Wells Fargo one. And you may have answered that already.
So one of the requirements of the Neighborhood Lift Program, and it's also a requirement of the proposed program, is that applicants would have to take a homeownership course. So they would have to complete the course before close of escrow for the home that they have entered into contract. NeighborWorks Homeownership Center Sacramento Region is administering the Neighborhood Lift Program for Wells Fargo, and they are also the agency that is providing the homebuyer education classes. We have used Neighborhood Homeownership Center in the past for our own first-time homebuyer program that you mentioned that we've had in the past. So we have had a working relationship with them, and we know that the classes and the workshops that they provide are very, very meaningful and useful. And then to answer your second question, the Wells Fargo Neighborhood Lift Program does offer a forgivable loan. It's forgiven after 5 years. The city assistance would not be forgiven. It would be a loan that they would have to pay off, but it would be a zero-interest loan.
Okay.
On the, excuse me, on the criteria for the Neighborhood Lift Program, just looking through their advertisement, it says that if more than one person will be on the mortgage, then the sum of the incomes will be determined. Is there a workaround for this if say, a husband makes $75,000 and has really good credit, and their wife makes $200,000 but has poor credit, so only the husband is on the mortgage? He applies, he gets a better rate, they can afford whatever, can afford a bigger house, but it's just the husband's name on it, and he meets the lower income criteria. Is that a way to work around to get people with more money to kind of get into this?
So the way that Wells Fargo has designed the Neighborhood Lift Program, they will only look at the income of the applicants. So to answer your question, yes, they would be eligible because only the husband would be the applicant, and the wife, even though she may be a member of the household, her income would not be considered because she's not an applicant.
Okay, so a family that were in that criteria that made $275,000 could be gifted $20,000 and then loaned at 0% by the city $20,000.
Yes,
Okay.
that is a possibility. And that's just the way that Wells Fargo has decided to implement their program. Again, because we are trying to follow their program and make the program as less intensive in terms of administration and making sure that it follows very closely to their guidelines, we have made our guidelines follow what they are proposing.
Since the funding may come from funds allocated for affordable housing, has the city looked at what the additional administrative costs would be in order to kind of cancel that loophole out and make sure only people who need assistance are getting the $20,000 from the city?
So we have, in considering creating this Neighborhood Live program, we did look at all the other projects that we have on our plates, and to be honest with you, we would not have proposed it if it required a lot more administrative burden, because that means that we would have to process applications in-house as well, right? So we would have to do the application intake, we would have to review the incomes of the applicants. At that point, we would probably be looking at other criteria that at this point we would not be doing because we are following what Wells Fargo is doing. So it would be substantially more administrative work if we were to go that route.
So I have to say, I do understand your concern, but remember, there's another step in here, is that somebody still has to qualify for the mortgage, and the fictitious couple that you're describing would have a really hard time qualifying for the mortgage, and therefore, they wouldn't get the $40,000.
Well, in terms of, somebody making $75,000 would have a difficult time getting a $300,000 house?
No, but when you're in the mortgage part of it, they're going to look at your tax returns, and if you're filing jointly, it's going to be tough for them to qualify for the mortgage. And in past programs, when we've done things like this, we've had, I am not aware of anybody who defrauded the program, as we've talked about it over the years.
So correct, so in our past, like our first-time homebuyer assistance program, we did all of the application intake. So we did have to review the applicant's income. We did a fairly extensive review, not only collecting source documentation like pay stubs, income tax returns, social security letters, but we also did third-party verification. So we would send out letters to the employers, to social security, to EDD, to get their income documentation. And while you are able to review the income more meticulously and carefully, it does take a lot more time and effort on staff side to administer a program like that. Again, because we are trying to complement the Wells Fargo program, we are selecting to use their eligibility criteria for this particular program.
Thank you.
I had a suggestion, and that is, if you're a first-time home buyer person that receives a reservation letter, if they are using a local West Sacramento real estate agent or brokerage firm, I think that that should be encouraged and maybe incentivized. Is that the right word?
Incentivized.
Thank you. That was the only thing that I thought might be a nice addition
Okay.
to this program.
I noticed too here in the LIFT program, something I hadn't seen before, that they offer even a little bit bigger bonus from Wells Fargo if you are disabled or a veteran.
That is correct,
And I
yes.
thought that was terrific.
Our program would not offer that, but yes, Wells Fargo offers slightly more if you're a veteran and I believe for educators.
Oh, yeah, firefighter, emergency medical technician, teacher. That's super. If they get that bonus, is there a way, if they get that bonus from Wells Fargo, is there a way that we could give their application on our side a gold star too?
If that's something that the commission wants to propose and recommend, we can certainly include that in our guidelines.
So you have to be a resident, use a local realtor, and get their gold star to get our gold star.
Win-win-win.
It's not currently written into the guidelines. Our guidelines are just a straight 20,000. We don't provide additional funding or incentives for those job classifications. But if that's something that the commission wants to propose, that's something that we can certainly contemplate and include. And again, ultimately, it'll be the council who would make the final determination if they want to follow that. But that's certainly something that we can recommend.
I don't want to do anything that would make more work for y'all. If it doesn't make any more work, yes. If it makes more work, no.
I don't think it's something like that would create more work. It's just more of how much money, how much additional funding they would get.
I don't think it's any additional funding. I think it's putting them on the top of the pile,
Oh, I see, okay.
like an
So-
accelerator.
Got it, okay.
Yeah, just like if they're a resident or they live here, if they're a resident and a teacher, then they go to the top of the pile.
How would you?
You could just put those same check boxes on your application.
So would you rate one higher than another? So somebody who is a firefighter but not a resident, would they be weighed equally, or would the resident still be weighed higher?
What do you all think?
There must be a firefighter in West Sacramento.
There must be a firefighter in West Sacramento, right? I mean,
Okay, so then,
if they're trying to get a home loan from West Sacramento, then I'd assume they'd hopefully be moving here, right?
They will be a resident.
Right? So they're either a current resident or planning to be a resident. So I don't know, I think,
I would certainly like for current residents who are renters to be able to buy homes here. To me, that would be,
okay.
but that's just me. I'm just one of 7.
I think it makes sense to match their incentives, right? Or their version of ranking on some level. So if they're giving extra bonus points in terms of money for teachers, maybe ours are similar to what she was saying with adding a ranking for being a teacher or something like that.
Or veteran, or disabled, the same things
All
they
of-
have.
all
Same
of things that are
categories that they have.
So I wanted to go back to a point similar that Commissioner Crystal was talking about in terms of the potential for spreading out that $200,000 pot a little more. I completely understand what you're saying about, the cost, the median cost of houses and, finding that bridge and that affordability. I just wonder if there might be, a way to do case by case, because although that's the median, there are homes that are less, and perhaps, the applicant is getting a primary mortgage that only requires, like you were saying, 3.5% or 4%, to where they might not need quite as much of the city funds. And then I'm just wondering if it might be possible to say the cap is 20,000, but maybe if this mortgage, if they can work it out with the Wells Fargo and the primary mortgage, like FHA type loans, where they only need so much and the cost of the home, I mean, there are still some homes in West Sacramento, even under 300, that then they get maybe 8,000 from the city, and then there's 12,000 left for, someone else. Because I think this is just a wonderful program. I think it's so great, and the more people that could benefit from it, I think the better, so.
We can certainly look into incorporating some mechanism to look at what their actual need is, as opposed to just a straight $20,000 allocation. And we have done that in the past, and with the first-time homebuyer program, it's an up-to amount.
Right.
And then we do look at their payment to ensure that it falls within certain parameters to make sure that, they're only getting as much as they need and not more.
Yeah, I realize that anything we ask, like you were saying, creates work, I realize that, but I think that, as much as we can squeeze out of that pot of money would be ideal, more people we can get in, the better.
I wholeheartedly agree. I wrote down sliding scale of some sort in my notes here as a question for you, but since 2 other people already asked it, I just want to chime in and say I agree on that one. I did have a follow-up question, though, if there's no other questions. Okay. So this may be a bit absurd and maybe not something that's planned for outright in a single appropriation, but I'm curious if the market bottoms out and home prices fall substantially, would that affect how you administer this program, assuming that Wells Fargo's program is still going on and this appropriation isn't, emergency funded somewhere else to cover city needs? Is there any contingency for that?
Well, first of all, let's hope it doesn't happen.
Completely agree.
But yeah, again, so we would anticipate that the funding will go fairly quickly, and then we would have to go back to the commission and the council to request additional allocation of funds if we wanted to continue the program, and especially if the neighborhood lift program was to continue, because again, keep in mind that we are tying our program to the existence of the neighborhood lift program. So as long as that program continued and there was a desire from the council and the commission to continue our program and provide the additional assistance, we can, at that point, look at what the market values are, what the median prices are, and make any adjustments to the maximum awards that applicants can get.
I would imagine this first round to be gone within the first 90 days, though.
I would anticipate that it would go Very fast, correct.
Is that from previous experience? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, no.
You mentioned the repayment. When does the repayment start? Is it when they sell their house or after 5 years?
So the term of the loan would be, would match the term of the first mortgage up to 30 years. Or if they sell the home, if they cease to occupy the property as their primary residence, so they have to be owner occupants. If the loan recipients become deceased, or again, the 30-year term.
And it starts at the same time as the standard first mortgage would start, so they
That
would
is
have to
correct.
start making payments to the city of West Sacramento.
That is correct. So our loan would be in second position, and we have confirmed with Wells Fargo that they, because theirs is a forgivable loan after 5 years, they would go behind our, our loan, so the Wells Fargo money would be in third position in terms of title.
I just wanted to say that I agree with Crystal and Nicole, that I think that there is a possibility that we could serve more families if we did more of like a sliding scale. I think that a $40,000 down is, you know, certainly on a $300,000 house, if the bank is going to loan you $80,000 or 80% on your first, you have a gap of $60,000. But there are a lot of other programs out there, and there are less expensive homes in areas where we'd love to see really awesome buyers. So my thought is, I think that $30,000 is a good chunk of change if they have 20 from Wells Fargo and 10 from the city and a possible additional 10 if their family, you know, on a needs basis.
I agree with that.
Okay.
And I liked Chris's idea too, with the gold star for those that meet the criteria of a teacher or a law enforcement or other public service, like
So-
firefighter.
I do have to tell you that years ago, one of my employees at the bowling alley applied for one of West Sacramento's first home buyer assistance programs. And to make the minimum levels that they needed to get a bank loan, they needed their mom, and one of my employees, this employee was 18. It had to be him, his mom, his dad, and his 17-year-old brother who also worked for me. All of their income combined was still below the minimum level. And so I think, you know, it's one thing to think about these folks as being teachers and firefighters and these other scenarios, but an awful lot of these folks are people for whom an extra $100 on their house payment is $100 too much. And when I think of the Omega family who had to scrape that money together to be able to buy that house, and they could not have done it without the down payment, with the home that they took here through neighborhood work, or the classes, and getting the down payment assistance, and they are still in that home, and they were a success story. End of my story.
So if modifications were to be made, if there was any agreement amongst the commission to make modifications to what you're proposing, what does that do to the timeline on the document where I think people were going to be submitting applications the 31st through the 1st of June, and knowing that you need to go through a couple other levels of...
Correct. So we are anticipating to present the guidelines to council on the second meeting in June. So we certainly have enough time to make the modifications that the commission would request and present those to the council at the June 19th meeting, I believe,
So when are you looking to start taking in applications?
as soon as the program is approved. So ideally, the next day, we could start taking applications.
Also, I just wanted to add that council requested, I think at the last meeting, that the commissions, when staff reports the commission's recommendation, were to do so rather than individual comments, but what is the commission acted on as a whole. And so it might be, with regard to this recommendation, that you might want to make a motion to approve staff's recommendation with these modifications, and then list out the modifications that you're talking about, for example, aligning with the Wells Fargo incentives and/or evaluating up to 20, perhaps less. So I'm not trying to word it, but just to let you know that when you act, it would be good that you make a motion, including the language that you want staff to present to the vote is on the entire recommendation of the commission.
Okay. So the two that I did here is consider a sliding scale based upon overall need and income and the price of the house that they're buying. Would you know that when you approve them for the loan?
So we would give them an initial reservation letter once we receive their application with confirmation that they have been approved by the Wells Fargo LIFT program. At that point, we wouldn't know how much money they would need, but they would know that they have a reservation of up to $20,000 or
Okay.
$10,000, whatever the cap the commission wants to recommend. Once they enter into contract and get the approval from the first mortgage lender, at that point, we would have to request their first mortgage lender documentation, their underwriting analysis, so that we can see how much money they would need to make sure that their payment, or to make sure that they would be able to buy that home. So it would add a lot more steps than we were originally anticipating. But again, if that's the commission's recommendation, that's what we can recommend to the council as well.
Is that what we're recommending? Okay.
Yeah, and then the
The other is the.
priority for
Right, to-
teachers.
If you get a
And-
flood of applications, that there be a priority, not only for the people who are living and working in West Sacramento, but those that met the criteria that gets the bonus money from Wells Fargo, but not bonus money from us, just a little bit more. Are we agreed on that?
I don't think I followed that entirely.
Oh,
So
that's going to be super articulate tonight.
in the Wells Fargo, what page was that on?
Here, you just
I just
have it.
flipped past
It's the
it.
Wells Fargo flyer. It
Yeah.
says if you fill it into one of those job applications, the Wells Fargo will give you, you're too far, it's a little closer to the front. It's the color
Oh, okay.
page with the
Yes.
Wells Fargo logo.
Okay.
It says that if you fall into one of those criteria, a veteran, disabled, teacher, emergency responder, you can be eligible for $2,200 more, or $2,250 more. And what I'm recommending is that the West Sacramento application include checks boxes for those same criteria, and if it becomes necessary to prioritize applications because you've received a flood at one moment, that to consider those as ways to elevate some as bigger priority.
Correct.
Not more money.
Just
My
a priority.
only comment to that is, are we limiting that to one checkbox as a priority lifter, elevator? Because what if I am a military who now works as a firefighter, and my wife is a teacher? Do I get three?
Nope, you just get
So it's
one.
limit one.
Right, because Wells
I think
Fargo
that's
doesn't
fair.
give you money
Yeah.
for each one of those check boxes.
I would recommend just one because it would make it very complicated to,
We're going to set up a ranked choice voting system for this.
Yes, just one. All right, we agreed about that, because I'm going to
Well,
word this
I have a
formally.
concern with that.
Totally.
Okay,
Is, for some of these, like, person in the military, teacher, they're on the lower income level, but the firefighter and the police tend to probably be pretty close to meeting the not qualifying for this because their income is higher. I think prioritizing them does kick out a lot of the lower people, which this is more designed to help. So I have some reservations about making that the tiebreaker, if they're already getting a bump from Wells Fargo.
Well, if they don't qualify for the loan, like if their income's too high, then they're not gonna qualify for the loan anyway.
No, I understand that. They're already getting a bump from Wells Fargo. And that, I think a lot of them are going to be on the higher end of the income for meeting the income
Like
limit.
close to the
Yes.
37, okay.
So that is one concern I
That's what you're
have.
saying, yeah.
but you're not recommending now to prioritize based upon income, it's timestamp.
correct. The only recommendation for priority right now was working full-time or currently living in West Sacramento.
So just to be clear, so the priority would be, if I live in West Sacramento, I need to buy a home, I need down payment assistance, I qualify, and I am number 11 on the list, I'm gonna, or, well, I'm just, right,
You're number 43
I'm
on the
not
list.
going to, the person in front, who would be above me, would be somebody who also lives or works in West Sacramento and is a firefighter, policeman, teacher, or one of those other named
That is
groups.
correct.
And that's how that would work, and I am fine with that. I might just say just teachers.
I'm totally
That
fine with
would be,
that.
that would be rather unfair, so,
Can you live with that? Do we need to vote?
I can live with that.
Okay. All right, so I think what I hear is, the motion is to recommend this housing assistance program as written to council with 2 modifications. The first being, consider a sliding scale that is based upon income and the value of the house being purchased. And the second is to consider using the Wells Fargo priority criteria as a way to have some applications be nearer to the front of the line, as a way to prioritize applications for our program.
Correct.
Okay.
I'll just add that to the sliding scale, that basically the idea would be that it would be a little more fine-tuned to the applicant's actual needs up to the 20,000.
Up to the 20,000, okay. All right, so do I have a motion for that mouthful that I just said?
I make a motion to approve that recommendation to council.
With the 2 modifications?
Yes, with the 2 modifications.
And a second?
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. See, I'm reading my
Thank you.
card this time. Thank you very much, and good job not
Thank you.
coughing.
Kept it right to the end.
All right, so we are now on to the commission calendar.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. We have a few events coming up, not many, but there's an open house on Saturday at 11 o'clock at Station 44. And at 11 o'clock on Thursday tomorrow at the, on the Old Sacramento waterfront dock, there's going to be a media event where both Sacramento and West Sacramento will be announcing the first nomination phase of a river crossing public art project. And I think the Vice Mayor of Sacramento and our council member Ledesma will both be speaking along with the artist.
Awesome, and, wait, I have to go back to my front page now. Director's report.
Since we recently had a commission meeting a few weeks ago, I don't have any further updates for the commission at this time.
And speaking of calendar items, last time we were all together, Peggy was talking about the West Sac Community Day picnic, and she has a short update about that event because it poured down rain on Sunday.
Yes, so an announcement for your calendars. Please mark June 2nd as our new date for the picnic. It was postponed due to rain. And can't wait to see you all on the 2nd.
Future item requests? Anything you'd like to hear or learn about? You know, as you were talking about the home buyer, the loan program, I was thinking that we hadn't heard in a long time about how the Riverwalk, or the Riverwalk repayment, not Riverwalk, what's the housing program that we did over by the Riverwalk all those years ago?
Oh, Proposition 1C, the state grant, the 23 million.
It's the housing project that was built down by the river way back in the day, that people could get into those homes, but they had to sell them back at cost. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to look it up from my old ancient meeting notes. I don't think we've heard about it in years. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do not. But, so in the past, I can tell you that we've had the shared equity housing program, our first-time homebuyer program. We currently still have our inclusionary housing program. I think that is about it for housing programs. Although we did have, as part of our neighborhood stabilization program, NSP funding, we did, with our nonprofit partner who acquired dilapidated or foreclosed homes, rehab them, and then those homes were resold to low-income first-time home buyers. I'm not sure if that's the one that.
No,
you're
this program is
referring
so old, it was Aaron who used to update about it, and we may not have an update because that program is just wrapped up and done.
to. That could be the case, but if,
I'll think
we
about
can
it.
reach out to you if I do recall any other program.
I'll ask
But
Aaron.
feel free to reach out to me as well if you do remember the name.
Okay.
And we'll be more than glad to provide an update.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, let's adjourn. Thank you, everybody.